During a live congressional hearing, Donald Trump whispered, "Go back to Africa," under his breath. He didn't realize his mic was active, but Jasmine Crockett's reply stunned the entire room and captivated America. The atmosphere in the Kansas state capitol was arid and thick with expectation. Rustling papers, clicking pens, muttered whispers signaled a panel that had stretched too long and turned too personal. The tension clung to people's coats like grit. The Congressional Subcommittee hearing on education policy had slogged into its third hour, and tempers were fraying. Representative Jasmine Crockett, poised in a navy blazer, had stayed silent for much of the recent segment, not for lack of words, far from it, but she was choosing her moment, as she always did. Opposite her sat Donald Trump, once a familiar face on morning talk shows, now a key figure in federal education reform, quick-witted, driven, and never one to yield. Today, though, he seemed restless, defensive. Something about being questioned, especially by a black woman with authority, irked him. When Jasmine finally spoke, her voice was steady but firm. "So what you're proposing," she said, looking straight at Donald, "is that schools in underserved areas just aren't working hard enough?" Donald folded his arms, shifted in his chair. "I'm saying standards must apply universally, no excuses. But the system's never been fair," Jasmine countered, voice calm. "We can't discuss equity without tackling access. History matters, so does context." Donald smirked faintly. His microphone was still live. That's when it happened. He leaned slightly left, not fully into the mic, but near enough. His muttered words, sharp and clear, seeped into the speakers, just loud enough to be unmistakable. "Should just go back to Africa." A moment of silence, then a cough, a rustled page, a tightening throat near the room's rear. The words didn't sink in immediately until a black intern by the press table froze, his gaze shifting slowly to the Speaker.C-SPAN's feed caught every second. It was live. A few glanced at Jasmine, expecting her to rise, storm off, or speak loudly, but she didn't. Instead, she kept her hands clasped, blinked slowly, and paused. The subcommittee chair, an elderly man from Idaho, cleared his throat. "Let's stay focused, please." Donald didn't waver. He grabbed his water bottle and sipped as if nothing occurred. But his ears flushed red, revealing he knew the mic had caught him. Outside, the clip was already being edited and captioned. Inside, Jasmine locked eyes with him. Not furious, not wounded, just resolute. It was a look that said, "You think you've harmed me, but you've only exposed your true self." Yet she stayed silent, returned to her notepad, jotted one note, and let the session proceed as usual. That moment, those 10 seconds, spoke louder than any speech could. But silence doesn't last when a live mic and a nation are listening. The clip hit the internet before the hearing even concluded. Someone in the press box recorded it on their phone, zooming in on Donald's face as the words left his mouth. Within 20 minutes, "Go back to Africa" trended nationwide. Hashtags surged. Memes spread rapidly. The video was reposted, captioned, slowed, analyzed, debated endlessly. Donald's team knew it was dire the moment they exited the chamber. His aide, a young man in a gray suit named Brian, hurried beside him. "We need to say, it was misheard," he whispered, shielding him from cameras clustered at the hall's end. "I mumbled," Donald replied, not slowing his pace. "No one's sure what I said." But he was mistaken. People knew. It was too clear, too sharp, too raw. You could hear the pause, the irritation, the disdain in back. They slipped into a staff corridor. Donald checked his phone, buzzing with texts from allies and party members. Some were livid, some cautioned him, but none defended his words. A statement was needed fast. By the time the press team released their response, Mr. Trump was misquoted due to ambient noise and misunderstanding. He firmly opposes all racism and bias. The public had already judged. People weren't just angry. They were weary, not just from the words, but from how often this happened, followed by excuses, deflections, PR spin. The cycle was exhausting. People, had seen it too often. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett stayed quiet. Reporters trailed her to the elevator. One asked, "Congresswoman, will you address Mr. Trump's remark?" She glanced at them, pressed the button, and said simply, "Not yet." That yet sparked something odd, igniting both sides. Supporters called it poised restraint. Critics labeled it staged drama. In a quiet cafe near the Capitol, 3 staffers for another representative huddled over a laptop, rewatching the clip. One, a middle-aged white man with weary eyes, rubbed his forehead. "This'll explode if she speaks. It'll be everywhere." "She'll speak," a younger staffer said. "She has to." But Jasmine wasn't rushing. She spent the evening in her hotel, away from cameras, with her mother, who'd flown from Texarkana the day before. They ate dinner in silence for a while. Then her mother said, "You'll say something, baby." Jasmine gazed out the window. City lights flickered under a cloudy sky. "Yeah," she said, "but not what they expect." Elsewhere, Donald wasn't sleeping. He sat on his hotel bed, laptop open, watching cable news replay the clip repeatedly. His phone buzzed with missed calls from donors and former colleagues. People were abandoning him. Some urged silence, others pushed for a formal apology. But Donald wasn't built for humility. Not yet. "They misheard me," he said again, mostly to himself. Brian, still across the room, didn't reply, just looked at him with concern, not judgment. It wasn't just about his career anymore. This moment was bigger than both. Donald was starting to see he no longer controlled the story. But power shifts unexpectedly, and Jasmine was about to seize it in a way no one predicted. The next morning, the Capitol cafeteria was oddly hushed. Cameras lined the press room hallway, cords trailing across tiles. Reporters sipped stale coffee, eyes glued to their phones. Something was brewing. They sensed it. At exactly 10 a.m., Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stepped to the podium alone. No entourage, no flags stacked behind her, no speechwriters nearby. Just her, a black folder in hand, and the same calm from the hearing. Cameras clicked us. She took the mic. She paused briefly, just enough to focus attention, then opened the folder, glanced at it, and closed it. "I planned to read something prepared," she said, "but I don't think I need to." She leaned slightly into the mic. "What happened yesterday wasn't new to me." Her voice didn't waver, didn't aim for righteousness or poetry. It was just present, measured. "I've been told to go back since I was a teen, waiting in a Shreveport store line. Back then it was an older woman who didn't like my direct gaze. I've heard it on planes, whispered in elevators, even in boardrooms, though more tactfully phrased. So no, I wasn't shocked." She paused. A few reporters shifted uncomfortably. "What shocked me," she continued, "was that some thought I should be shocked, like this was a rare slip, a tragic mishap in a world that runs on respect. That's not the country I know." The room stayed silent. No clicks now. No one dared interrupt. "I want people to understand," she said. "When you tell someone to go back, you're not questioning their citizenship. You're questioning their belonging, their worth, their place at the table." She looked straight into the camera. "And I'm not going anywhere." That line hid 1,000 screens before the press conference ended, resonating in classrooms, barbershops, on back porches, in towns unfamiliar with Jasmine Crockett, but familiar. With that resolve, that tone, she didn't cry or shout. She told a story. "One year, my father took me to Washington, D.C. We stood outside the Supreme Court, and he said, 'This building belongs to you, too.' I was 11. I didn't believe him. Some days I still don't," she exhaled. "But I came here anyway, ran for office anyway, take up space anyway, not because I was welcomed, but because I didn't need permission." Her words weren't polished like a speechwriter's. They were sharp, personal. "I'm not here to shame Donald Trump," she said. "I'm here to remind those watching that belonging isn't earned with perfection. We belong because we're human, because we wake up here, fight here, build here, love here. We belong because our ancestors did the work that made this place possible." Took a breath, letting silence settle before her next words. "And if that makes someone uncomfortable enough to say what he said, Maybe that discomfort is theirs to wrestle with, not mine. The press conference ended without questions. She closed her folder, stepped from the podium, and walked out as if she had better things to do than argue, and she did. Her phone rang seconds later, people crying, cheering, even those from the other side texting. "You said what I couldn't say aloud," but not everyone applauded. Some were gearing up for a backlash that would test her resolve. By noon, Jasmine's words were clipped and shared across every major platform. Millions watched before lunch, some replaying it, not because they missed it, but because they needed to feel it again. Across the nation, people responded in rare ways, not with slogans or hashtags, but with stories, voices. In a Toledo, Ohio diner, an older black man named Reggie, in his booth of 20 years, leaned over his coffee and told the waitress, "I didn't know her name before, but that woman's got steel in her spine." In Flagstaff, Arizona, a Navajo teacher paused her lesson, played the video on the classroom projector, and let her students sit in silence. Then she said, "That's how you carry yourself when they try to cut you down." In Fresno, California, retired white veteran named Bill posted on Facebook, his first in a year. She spoke for more than just herself, but not everyone agreed. Conservative radio pounced, a Des Moines host barking into the mic. "This is another staged victim play too. Divide us." "She's grandstanding," callers chimed in. Some agreed, some pushed back. "She didn't throw a fit," one said. "She told the truth. If you don't like it, ask yourself why." Donald stayed silent. His team issued a longer, polished statement expressing regret if his words were misunderstood, but stopping short of admitting fault. The internet tore it apart. That night, Donald paced a borrowed Arlington, Virginia townhouse, windows shut, lights off, watching the clip again. Jasmine's words, her poise, the quiet fire beneath. "She's winning this," he muttered. Brian, his aide, nodded from the kitchen. "You can't spin out of this one." "I didn't mean it like that," Donald whispered. "It just slipped." Brian leaned on the counter. "That's the problem." Elsewhere, the impact grew. In Madison, Wisconsin, students packed an auditorium for an unrelated panel which turned into a discussion on identity, belonging, and who feels at home in America. Jasmine's speech looped between speakers. In a Mobile, Alabama barbershop, older men paused mid-cut to discuss her composure. "Back in my day, you'd get loud or swing," one said. She did neither. That takes more strength. But the moment's weight hit Jasmine, too. In her apartment, lights dim, a glass of water in hand, she avoided the news, not wanting to hear her name, from those who'd never carried the silence she held on that panel floor. Her phone buzzed. A message. From Senator Leah Drummond, a Texas conservative. Unexpected. That was powerful. "Would you meet?" Jasmine stared at the screen, not shocked, but feeling the world's weight heavier than ever. Her words had shaken something loose. People were listening, even those who'd never sat across from her, wanting to talk. But one person hadn't spoken, and when he did, it would shift the conversation's tone. In the middle of a live congressional hearing, Donald Trump whispered, "Go back to Africa," under his breath. He didn't know his mic was on, but Jasmine Crockett's reply stunned the entire room in America watching. The air in the Kansas state capitol was dry and thick with expectation. Rustling papers, clicking pens, muttered whispers signaled a panel that had stretched too long and turned too personal. The tension clung to people's coats like grit. The congressional subcommittee hearing on education policy had slogged into its third hour, and tempers were fraying. Representative Jasmine Crockett, poised in a navy blazer, had stayed silent for much of the recent segment. Not for lack of words, far from it, but she was choosing her moment, as she always did. Opposite her sat Donald Trump, once a familiar face on morning talk shows, now a key figure in federal education reform, quick-witted, driven, and never one to yield. Today, though, he seemed restless, defensive. Something about being questioned, especially by a black woman with authority, irked him. When Jasmine finally spoke, her voice was steady but firm. "So, what you're proposing," she said, looking straight at Donald, is that schools in underserved areas just aren't working hard enough. Donald folded his arms, shifted in his chair. I'm saying standards must apply universally, no excuses. But the system's never been fair, Jasmine countered, voice calm. We can't discuss equity without tackling access. History matters, so does context. Donald smirked faintly. His microphone was still live. That's when it happened. He leaned slightly left, not fully into the mic, but near enough. His muttered words, sharp and clear, seeped into the speakers, just loud enough to be unmistakable. He should just go back to Africa. A moment of silence, then a cough, a rustled page, a tightening throat near the room's rear. The words didn't sink in immediately, until a black intern by the press table froze, his gaze shifting slowly to the speaker's C-SPAN's feed caught every second. It was live. A few glanced at Jasmine, expecting her to rise, storm off, or speak loudly, but she didn't. Instead, she kept her hands clasped, blinked slowly, and paused. The subcommittee chair, an elderly man from Idaho, cleared his throat. Let's stay focused, please. Donald didn't waver. He grabbed his water bottle and sipped, as if nothing occurred. But his ears flushed red, revealing he knew the mic had caught him. Outside, the clip was already being edited and captioned. Inside, Jasmine locked eyes with him, not furious, not wounded, just resolute. It was a look that said, "You think you've harmed me, but you've only exposed your true self." Yet she stayed silent, returned to her notepad, jotted one note, and let the session proceed as usual. That moment, those 10 seconds, spoke louder than any speech could. But silence doesn't last when a live mic and a nation are listening. A week passed, but the conversation never cooled. It reached those who rarely followed politics, truckers hearing replays on Wichita radios, teens debating in Eugene, Oregon group chats. The moment cracked something open, not just about race, about civility, about how quick we dismiss others, how rare it is to see someone stand firm without striking back. Local TV-hosted roundtables, experts dissecting Jasmine's speech, Donald's apology, and everything between. Some called it a lesson in grace under fire. Others said Jasmine let Donald off too lightly. A late-night panelist noted, "No yelling. No drama, but that made it hit harder." She didn't answer with anger. She answered with truth. Not everyone accepted the apology. In Birmingham, activist Laurie Price went live on social media. "It's not just words," she said. "It's the weight behind them. An apology means nothing if the culture birthing those words doesn't change." In her quiet office, Jasmine read handwritten letters, hundreds of them. One stood out from a 5th-grade girl in Boise, Idaho, with a drawing of Jasmine at a podium. "You talk like my mom." Calm but strong. It stayed on her desk, but she knew praise could vanish as fast as it came. To a small group of interns that week, no cameras, no notes, she said, "Don't aim to go viral, aim to move forward. This town devours the loudest voice. You win by being steady, honest, human." Donald, meanwhile, faced an uphill climb. Though his statement softened some critics, others weren't convinced. Protesters appeared at his Sioux Falls event, holding signs, "Words have weight." In his hotel room that night, Donald stood at the mirror, wiping off his face, looking drained. Brian, his aide, sat by the window, scrolling headlines. "You going to keep doing press?" Donald shook his head. "No, I need to learn before I speak again." It wasn't a resignation, but something else. Maybe accountability start, maybe just reality's sting. He seemed changed, not transformed, but disrupted. The media moved on, as it does, to a new state scandal, pundits shifting gears. But something lingered, not in headlines, but in kitchens, break rooms, casual chats where someone said, "Did you see that speech?" The other nodded. Yeah, she said it how it needed to be said. At the Santa Fe airport, a TSA worker stopped Jasmine gently. "You showed us what power looks like when it's quiet." Jasmine smiled. "Thank you. I didn't think it'd echo this far." The woman nodded. "It did. Not every story ends in fireworks." Sometimes it's the stillness after the storm that lasts longest, but even stillness carries power if people sit with it and ask what they're truly learning. 2 months later, things seemed normal. Congress hummed along, news cycles turned, midterms, border bills or new scandals dominating. From figures half the country didn't vote for, but beneath the noise, something shifted. In Charleston, South Carolina, a civics teacher began her fall semester differently, showing Jasmine's press conference. Instead of the Constitution, then asked, "What does it mean to belong?" A student in the back answered, "It means you don't have to justify being here." That stayed with her. In D.C., Jasmine Crockett didn't become a household name, no magazine covers or book deals, but young staffers lined up to work for her, not for her volume, but for words that endured. Hallways changed too, people she rarely spoke, to nodded in passing. A Billings, Montana congressman stopped her. "You didn't just defend yourself, you defended those without a mic." Jasmine paused, smiled. That was the point. As for Donald Trump, he stayed out of the spotlight deliberately. No media tours, no podcasts, no teary interviews, just work, quiet, steady work. He met advocacy. Groups privately, not for show, just listening. In Columbus, Ohio, with a youth group on civic dialogue, a student asked, "What changed for you?" He didn't dodge. "Getting caught didn't change me. Being challenged did. I'm still working out what that means." No one clapped. They didn't need to. That wasn't the goal. Later that fall, a quiet vote passed on a bill for equitable school funding. Jasmine co-sponsored, Donald supported it too. No photo op, no grand reconciliation, but they voted together. It didn't make headlines, not flashy, but to those watching closely, it mattered. That panel room moment wasn't just about a remark, it was about who we are when tested. Jasmine didn't gain fame, but added weight to her voice, the kind that lingers past cameras. Donald didn't become a villain, but a mirror, forcing people to ask, "How often have I said in the dark what I wouldn't say in the light?" This wasn't a scandal story. It was about choice, to speak without shouting, teach without shaming, respond without reducing someone to a mistake. In a time of picking sides, Jasmine chose differently, clarity over noise. That choice left a mark deeper than outrage ever could. Some political moments fade fast. This one didn't, because people remember strength without cruelty, the pause, the breath, how someone stands when the ground shakes and they refuse to budge. That's the lesson. You don't need to yell to make a mark. You just need honesty when it matters most. If this story stirred you, share it. For more stories about who we are and who we strive to be, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started.